Buying a home in California by 2026? Here's the income you really need. And today we take a long, steady, unflinching walk through the true cost of trying to plant roots in a state where the dream of homeownership has quietly drifted further out of reach with every passing year. California has always been a place where hope ran higher than the numbers on paper, a place where people believed that if they worked hard, pushed forward, and held tightly to their goals, the door to a better life would eventually open, as if the sunlight itself promised that opportunity would always be waiting for those willing to reach for it. But as we move closer to 2026, that door is not opening the way it once did. And for many families who have lived here their entire lives, it no longer opens freely, but instead stands heavy, slow, and resistant. For others, it does not open at all. Because behind the coastline, behind the mountain ranges, behind the vibrant cities and the endless blue sky, a quieter story is being written in the numbers. The math of monthly payments, taxes, insurance, inflation, stagnant wages, and rising prices that push the California dream further away, even as families work harder than ever to keep it within reach. The truth is not loud, not dramatic, not shouted from rooftops. Instead, it sits quietly at kitchen tables where couples look at their budgets, where young people wonder if they will ever be able to stay, and where parents question whether their children will ever be able to live in the place they were raised. Tonight, we speak this truth slowly and clearly, the way reality deserves to be spoken. We begin with the state itself, a place where the median home price continues rising long after the population has begun to decline, a place where demand has far outpaced construction for more than a decade, and a place where even with new laws, new protections, and new policies, the gap between what homes cost and what families earn continues to stretch wider each year. For generations, California offered a unique promise: come here with a dream, work for it, and eventually, you could build a life that reflected your effort. But the numbers of 2026 do not negotiate with nostalgia, and they do not bend for sentiment. They simply stand in place, stark, unmoving, undeniable. To buy a home in California in 2026, the income required is no longer what it once was. It is not simply higher. It has leaped, doubled, and in some cities nearly tripled compared to what an average family earned just a decade ago. And as we move through each region, each county, each city, we see the same pattern, a wave that rises faster than wages can climb, a tide that pushes more families into renting, sharing, relocating, or leaving entirely. San Diego, the new 280,000 reality. In San Diego, where the ocean meets the cliffs and sunlight stretches across the year, the cost of buying a median-priced home has reached a point few ever imagined. According to the newest analysis, families now need nearly $280,000 in annual income to afford the median home with a 10% down payment, a number that is almost double what it was before the pandemic, and one that far exceeds the earnings of most households in the region. The average mortgage payment, including taxes, insurance, and maintenance, has climbed to over $6,000 each month, and with prevailing mortgage rates holding near 6% or higher, families are being stretched to the thinnest financial margins seen in decades. Median household income in San Diego remains under $120,000, which means only about 1 out of 10 families earn what is needed to buy. The housing affordability crisis is not new here, but the gap has widened sharply since the pandemic, when the median single-family home price rose by nearly $180,000 in just a few years. And as those numbers climbed, so did insurance premiums, with carriers pulling out of large portions of California or dramatically increasing rates due to wildfire projections, climate risks, and statewide insurer withdrawals. These layers, mortgage rates, prices, insurance, taxes, form a cost of living that pushes the average family to the outer edges of affordability. Los Angeles. In Los Angeles County, where millions live side by side and the city pulses with constant motion, housing has stepped into a category once reserved for the wealthy. Even a modest home in many neighborhoods can require incomes above $200,000, sometimes pushing toward $250,000. Or more when insurance and taxes are factored in, especially in hillside or brush-adjacent areas where wildfire risk triggers elevated insurance pricing. Teachers, nurses, police officers, social workers, and the working middle class, the backbone of the city, are increasingly finding that buying a home in the county they serve is no longer feasible without multiple earners or significant family assistance. But the story in Los Angeles runs deeper than rising prices alone, because affordability here is not a single obstacle. It is a maze, woven from decades of economic shifts, climate pressures, zoning restrictions, and the relentless gravity of demand that keeps pulling prices upward no matter how many families leave. In neighborhoods once considered entry-level, small bungalows now sell for over $1 million. And the monthly mortgage, when combined with property taxes and rising insurance premiums, pushes families to the edge of what is financially possible. In the hills, where breathtaking views come at an equally breathtaking cost, insurance has become its own quiet crisis, with some households reporting renewals jumping from $4,000 a year to over $12,000, and others being denied coverage entirely unless they turn to California's FAIR Plan, with its stripped-down protection and steep deductibles. And the weight of Los Angeles becomes even heavier when you consider how wages have failed to keep up with the city's financial transformation. Median household income lingers below $85,000, a number that reflects the heart of the workforce, the teachers shaping future generations, the nurses holding families together in moments of crisis, the essential workers who kept the city functioning during the hardest years of the pandemic. Yet these very workers, the foundation upon which the city stands, find themselves locked out of ownership unless they relocate far into the outer regions of the county or leave entirely. The traffic that Los Angeles is famous for is more than an inconvenience. It is the physical sign of a deeper problem. Families forced to travel an hour or 2 or 3 each way because the neighborhoods close to their workplaces have become financially unreachable. And as more families move outward in search of affordability, the outer regions grow more crowded, more expensive, and more competitive, creating pressure that ripples through the entire region like a slow-moving wave. There is another quiet factor shaping Los Angeles housing: the investor presence, which has grown significantly in recent years. Private equity groups, institutional buyers, and corporate landlords have acquired thousands of homes, often purchasing with all cash, outbidding first-time buyers who cannot compete with the speed and certainty of corporate offers. These properties are then turned into rentals, further reducing the supply available to families who hope to buy, creating a cycle where ownership becomes less accessible and long-term renting becomes the default reality. In some areas, long-time homeowners now find themselves surrounded by short-term rentals, corporate holdings, or properties owned by people who do not live in the city at all but see it as a financial asset rather than a community. And while the skyline of Los Angeles continues to grow, with new high-rises piercing the sky in downtown, Hollywood, and the West Side, the reality is that many of these units remain financially out of reach for the majority of residents, designed for a tier of income that does not reflect the lived experience of most families in the county. The emotional truth is this: Los Angeles is a city full of dreams, but it is also a city full of contradictions. A place where opportunity is vast, but affordability is shrinking. A place where culture thrives, but home ownership slips further away. And as we move closer to 2026, the line dividing who can buy and who cannot grows sharper, clearer, and harder to cross, reshaping not just the housing market, but the identity of the city itself. San Jose, the tech capital's towering costs. In San Jose, at the heart of Silicon Valley, the median home price still hovers above $1.3 million, and the income needed to buy a typical family home reaches well into the $250,000 to $300,000 range. Even with strong local wages, the price gap continues to widen, tightening the market into a space where only high-income households can gain footing, pushing long-time residents further away from the neighborhoods they grew up in. But San Jose is not just expensive. It is a reflection of an economy that has grown at a pace human lives cannot keep up with. An economy where innovation moves faster than incomes, where valuations rise quicker than opportunity, and where the cost of simply existing within the orbit of tech giants becomes a financial burden that reshapes entire communities. For decades, Silicon Valley symbolized possibility, a place where hard work, talent, and imagination could build lives that exceeded expectations. But the reality today is more fractured, more unforgiving, and more defined by the divide between those inside the tech economy and those outside of it. Teachers, nurses, hospitality workers, technicians, and small business owners, the people who keep San Jose running, are finding the financial ground shifting beneath them, as if the city they serve has slowly drifted into a tier of wealth that no longer includes them. Many families earn solid incomes by national standards, yet feel as though they are standing in place, watching the cost of everything rise around them while their purchasing power quietly erodes. And beneath the surface, another dynamic plays out: the constant pressure from venture capital, startups, IPO surges, and cycles of rapid growth that inject massive wealth into the region, wealth that inevitably pushes housing demand even higher, even when the broader economy slows. Homes are often purchased not because families dream of living in them, but because investors see them as stable, appreciating assets in a market where prices rarely fall for long. Entire neighborhoods once filled with young families now carry price tags that only executives, senior engineers, or stock-compensated employees can realistically afford. And even they speak quietly about the strain of six-figure mortgages and the pressure to maintain high incomes in a region where layoffs can redefine a household's future overnight. And as housing costs climb, the ripple effects spread through every part of life in San Jose. Commutes lengthen as workers move farther out in search of affordability. Public schools feel the loss of young families who once filled their classrooms. Local businesses watch foot traffic shift as entire communities slowly hollow out. Insurance and taxes add their own weight to the burden. High property values mean high insurance premiums, and replacement cost models in the Bay Area push rates upward even in neighborhoods not directly exposed to wildfire risk. Property taxes scale with every price increase, turning homeownership into a financial balancing act where even high earners feel the pressure. Generations who once believed they would raise their families in the same city now find themselves driving farther each year, pushed outward by prices they cannot control, carrying with them the quiet grief of losing a home not because they chose to leave, but because the market decided for them. As 2026 approaches, San Jose stands at the crossroads of two Californias: the California of immense prosperity and the California of increasing exclusion, a place where opportunity remains vast, yet ownership becomes a privilege for fewer and fewer. Central Valley, lower prices, but lower wages. Across the Central Valley, from Fresno to Bakersfield, from Merced to Visalia, stretching through the long interior spine of California, where agriculture, logistics, and working-class families form the backbone of daily life. Home prices remain lower than the coast, but the wages that support those communities remain significantly lower as well, creating a gap that is often less visible but just as difficult to overcome. Families earning $90,000 to $110,000, incomes that would once have been considered strong, even stable, now find themselves wrestling with mortgage rates that erase the advantage of lower home prices, forcing them into monthly payments that no longer feel aligned with the cost of living in this historically affordable region. And while the Central Valley is far from the wildfires that devastate the northern forests and coastal hillsides, the insurance premiums here still rise year after year, influenced not by local risk alone, but by the statewide pressure on carriers, the reinsurance market, and the broad financial strain facing the entire insurance industry across California. In Fresno, where median home prices remain modest compared to the Bay Area or Southern California, families still find themselves struggling to qualify for loans because wages have not kept pace with even modest price increases. And every tick upward of the interest rate pushes the dream further away, even for households that believed they were close. In Bakersfield, where affordability was once a defining feature, the rise in overall living expenses, insurance, utilities, taxes, and transportation now consumes a larger portion of household income, leaving families unsure if they can sustain homeownership long-term, even in a city traditionally viewed as a refuge from California's high costs. Across the valley, the stories share a common thread. People who work long hours, sometimes in harsh conditions, supporting industries that feed the state and power its economy, yet finding themselves increasingly burdened by a market that demands more from them than ever before. Parents who plan to buy a first home are discovering that the down payment keeps slipping out of reach. Young couples saving diligently watch the math shift month after month as rising rates outpace their progress. Retirees who hope to downsize find that even smaller homes carry costs inflated by statewide insurance pressures. What makes the Central Valley unique is not the price of the homes. It is the fragile balance between what a home costs and what a household earns. A balance that has tipped so subtly over the years that many did not realize the shift until it was already too late. Many families now live with the uncomfortable truth that while coastal Californians leave due to extreme prices, Valley residents may one day leave not because the homes are too expensive, but because the margins of life here have become too thin to sustain. And beneath all of this lies a deeper emotional reality. The Central Valley is home to generations who have built communities through consistency, through labor, through quiet dedication, and the thought of being priced out not through luxury demand, but through systemic economic pressure feels like an invisible betrayal. For many, homeownership no longer represents advancement. It represents survival, a constant calculation, a race against forces far beyond their control. As 2026 approaches, the Central Valley stands not as an affordable alternative to the rest of the state, but as another region caught in the widening gap between wages that remain grounded and a housing system that continues to rise, reshaping what affordability means in a state where even the most modest homes now demand incomes that stretch far beyond what local families earn. Orange County, the new suburban elite. In Orange County, especially in communities like Irvine, home prices push far above $1.4 million, requiring incomes of $260,000 to $280,000 for a typical three-bedroom home. These are not luxury properties, they are standard suburban homes, the type that once represented middle-class stability but now sit beyond reach for most households. For many years, Sacramento stood as the quiet refuge for families priced out of California's coastal cities, a place where people escaping the impossible costs of Los Angeles, San Diego, and the Bay Area could finally breathe again, finding homes that were larger, calmer, and far more within reach. But everything changed in the wake of the pandemic migration, when tens of thousands of households, remote workers, retirees, and families desperate for affordability, moved into the region all at once, creating a sudden pressure that reshaped the housing market almost overnight and lifted prices to levels the city had never experienced before. Demand surged in a way Sacramento was never designed to absorb. And as bidding wars erupted on streets that were once quiet, local residents found themselves competing not with neighbors, but with buyers arriving from cities where budgets were dramatically higher, pushing the market upward at a pace that felt disorienting to families who had lived there for generations. The affordability that defined Sacramento, the quality that made it the reliable escape valve for coastal California, began to crumble under the weight of this rapid demand. And by the time the market settled, many longtime residents realized they could no longer buy in the very city they had planned to stay in forever. At the same time, wildfire risk around the perimeter of the region expanded quietly but steadily, stretching into suburbs that once sat comfortably outside the hazard zones. And with this shift came a wave of insurance reassessments that caught homeowners off guard, raising premiums and leaving some families confronting cancellations they had never imagined receiving. Areas near Folsom, El Dorado Hills, Auburn, and even sections of Citrus Heights and Fair Oaks saw heightened scrutiny from insurers, not because the fires had reached them directly, but because modeling now projected greater threat corridors, the kind of predictive mapping that triggers higher premiums even in communities untouched by flames. Families who once moved to Sacramento because it promised stability began facing monthly housing expenses that looked alarmingly similar to the coastal cities they fled. As mortgage rates climbed, insurance premiums rose, and property taxes increased in tandem with home valuations that had surged far beyond historical norms. In neighborhoods that were once considered accessible for first-time buyers, the income required to qualify for a standard 3-bedroom home slowly crept toward levels that local wages could no longer support, forcing many young couples to prolong renting indefinitely while watching newcomers from higher income regions secure the homes they had hoped to purchase. For years, Sacramento's identity was tied to its stability, predictable neighborhoods, moderate pricing, and a sense that the region was immune to the extreme volatility of California's coastal housing markets. But as the housing crisis spread inward, the city became a pressure point, absorbing stress that once flowed outward, and the impact has reshaped everything from rental markets to insurance availability to the overall cost of living. Residents now face expenses that would have been unimaginable a decade ago. As we move toward 2026, the story of Sacramento becomes not just a reflection of the housing crisis, but a warning, a signal that even the regions designed to absorb California's affordability struggles can no longer promise the stability they once offered, leaving families unsure not only of whether they can buy, but whether they can. Across every region, the pattern is the same. The cost of living has surged, but wages have not. The cost of buying a home has risen, but opportunity has not spread with it. Families who once believed homeownership was the natural next chapter now find themselves questioning whether the chapter will ever come. Younger generations, who watched their parents buy homes in their 20s or 30s, now wonder if they will still be renting in their 40s. Older generations look back at the California they grew up in and barely recognize the one that stands before them today. And slowly, a question forms, one whispered quietly in homes across the state. Is the California dream still attainable, or is it becoming something only the wealthiest can afford? Buying a home in California by 2026 is still possible, but it demands a level of financial strength that would have been unimaginable 2 decades ago, a stability that reaches beyond working hard, a resilience that goes further than hope. This is not simply about buying a house, it is about whether families can remain rooted in the state they love. If this documentary has helped you understand the reality behind California's shifting housing landscape, then I invite you to stay close, stay connected, and stay part of a community that refuses to walk through this alone. Because when information is clear, when voices are steady, and when truth is shared with honesty, we face the future with far more strength than we ever could alone. If this resonated with you, follow this channel, stay with us, and allow these stories to continue guiding you through the California you live in, and the California we are all trying to understand.